If you are so sure on what you think you know about yourself, your self-ownership, and your freedom, then we have reached the moral crux. We have understood, then, the nature of tyranny, of authoritarianism, of how slavery manifests, and how we can get rid of it. But what need is there really for modern abolitionism? That is, to get rid of slavery in the modern day. And I'm not just talking about normal slavery. Of course, I'm talking about something much deeper. If you ask yourself the 5 questions we discussed in the previous video, which you'll also see on the screen, you will see that there is a great need, perhaps, for modern abolitionism. With asking ourselves those questions and getting clear on all the definitions explored regarding ownership and morality alike, are the parallels between slavery and government coincidental? We see these two institutions as separate from one another, but what makes them different? Explore any of the past definitions within this documentary or the quotes said by 19th century abolitionists and observe what happens if we correlate our concepts in regards to the government systems of today. Indeed, the goal of modern abolitionism and the abolitionism of the future is to determine if any of the systems of slavery are still present within the world after the abolition of chattel slavery, and to work toward creating the freedom that the whole world deserves, and that is true freedom. As great 19th century abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison tells us, our country is the world and our countrymen are all mankind. Many people break this simple wisdom in cheering on their nation and condemning other nations, unable to see the philosophical undertones of all the world's people. Many people will even acknowledge that the whole world is in a disturbed place, or that there are many divisions keeping people from their own humanity. Many people will also engage and look for different methods to help fix these conditions, whether it's elections or petitions or changing laws or paperwork or even violence, arguing that others are not doing enough. To be outright, as the modern abolitionist I am, as William Lloyd Garrison was also, many of these same people are simultaneously willingly supporting slavery. People support slavery for both themselves and their neighbors. These people don't know it, and when they are given signs or warnings, they don't inquire upon it. Since I am the abolitionist saying that you are the slave, though I must admit I was once among you, allow me to help you see it, if you will allow yourself to listen. It could be tempting for an abolitionist like me to yell or get frustrated, seeing evil in its ignorant supporters, yet this resistance can be expected in regards to any significant change in history. Thus, I will patiently plead for your attention in hopes that you may care for this world as much as any voluntarist does. To reiterate, I encourage you go back if you must, to learn what voluntarism is, to learn about the nature of slavery, but let us come to understand that ultimately the nature of slavery is merely that of the government. To be clear, when I say government, what is referred to is the concept of authority, the right to rule, involuntary hierarchy. The ruler of subjects is no different from the master of slaves. So ask yourself these questions. If claiming 100% ownership of someone's property is slavery, what percentage isn't? If taking 100% of someone's property is theft, what percentage isn't? Taxation is simply a euphemism for theft, written on fancy pieces of paper and covered with justification. Physical slavery is having someone work for you involuntarily, whereas theft is having someone pay you involuntarily. What makes one moral and the other not? Both situations are involuntary, and therefore both involve a lack of freedom and the need for violence for compliance. Both situations involve a claim over ownership that does not belong to the claimant. Yet where are the anti-slavery advocates abhorring this obvious problem that almost the entire world engages in? In the same way vegans abhor animals being mistreated when they are also still being mistreated, in the same way spiritual gurus and religious individuals abhor violence and fear when they are still allowing this practice to go on without question, in the same way atheists abhor dogmatic beliefs when they are still believing in euphemisms creating exceptions to morality, in the same way social justice warriors attack others for being oppressive and racist when they are allowing oppression and separation between peoples and nations, in the same way any activist can argue that we need to create better laws or attain grants for certain projects when they disregard how those laws or grants are carried out. Now we may know why it is said that lies mixed with truth makes the lies more dangerous. We may argue that nobody is able to perfectly be moral, looking across all their actions, but that does not give us an excuse to ignore outright violence or slavery, most especially when we see it as the exact opposite, since most will argue taxation is necessary, if not even moral or good. Then as for those who say it's a necessary evil, they devalue the word evil, as if making such a clarification has no effect, since evil would automatically insinuate it is not necessary, as we acknowledge there is a good. If someone claims ownership over the property of your life, you open yourself up for them to obtain ownership over the property of everything else within your life. What is yours, unless you voluntarily give it away. But if it's involuntary, someone is trying to hold you captive. As it must be reiterated, you are not beholden to any person, group, or system. You own you. And whether you want to say God owns you, or nature owns you, or truth owns you, at the end of the day, you have self-ownership. And those premises can support that premises. But the point being is that the government or no slave master controls you, and you shall not let that happen. We must work together to create that effect, of which we call modern abolitionism. William Lloyd Garrison, leading abolitionist, said, "I will be as harsh as truth and as uncompromising as justice. I am in earnest, I will not equivocate, I will not excuse, I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard." Mark Passio, a de-occultist and philosopher, said, "Freedom comes before everything, including life. It isn't life, freedom, property, it's freedom, life, property. That's the correct order. Life without freedom isn't worth living, because life without freedom is slavery." Most people are so fearful and attached to life that they would give up freedom to have safety. No amount of safety is worth the loss of freedom. No amount of even health is worth the loss of freedom. Dangerous, unhealthy freedom is still more important than a life where you are perfectly safe and perfectly healthy and enslaved. As soon as some crisis comes down that threatens their safety or health, they are immediately willing to sacrifice their freedom in the name of safety or health. You have to be willing to die. Liberty or death means liberty or death. Charles Bukowski, an author, says slavery was never abolished, it was only extended to include all the colors. Voltaire, a philosopher, says, "It is forbidden to kill, therefore all murderers are punished unless they kill in large amounts and to the sound of trumpets." In general, the art of government consists in taking as much money as possible from one party of citizens to give to the other. The best government is a benevolent tyrant, tempered by an occasional assassination. Imagine all contradictions, all possible incompatibilities. You will find them in the government, in the law courts, in the churches, in the public shows of this droll nation. It is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong. Benjamin Tucker, a philosopher, supports this whole idea. He says, "My direct battle is for freedom as the opposite of slavery." He says liberty will be seen and read and understood more and more as time goes on. And he says the very purpose of the state is to make the mass of the people the slaves of the privileged classes. From the Liberty newspaper, it says a far greater tyranny is that which enslaves the mind than any that enslaves the body. And of course, you can expand here dramatically. Look at these quotes. Mahatma Gandhi saying, how can one be compelled to accept slavery? I simply refuse to do the master's bidding. And we consider him to be somebody who helped create independence in this world. Well, how many people have the same spirit, the same courage to do what he did, or the founding fathers or others throughout history, to defend their liberty? And Samuel May, an abolitionist, talking about how they cannot make us slaves. They cannot take from us our money, but they cannot rob us of our respect for the rights of man, right? Our rights of man, this is what constitutes what he says is the love of liberty. Lysander Spooner talking about how even if you vote people into office, it doesn't make it right. Because all government, he says, is the difference between masters and slaves, and that there's never been a government with any legitimate existence, any one that's based on true consent. And he says the purpose of laws, originally, as they have always been, has been to rob and enslave the many. Frederick Douglass talks about how this is essentially a superstition that slaves have, where people see certain masters as perhaps doing good, and doing good for their people, for their slaves. And the slaves are falling for it, falling for this deception to keep themselves more enslaved. Auburn Herbert talking about how you may say, as a friend of mine says, I feel neither like a slave owner nor like a slave, but his feelings, however admirable in themselves, do not alter the system in which he consents to take part of trying to obtain control over his fellow man. So people can deny it, but the reality is there. He says every man and woman should be held by us all sacredly and religiously to be the true one owner of his or her faculties. They have sovereignty, in other words. Larkin Rose talks about how every government and its subjects is the same as the relationship between a master and a slave. The one with the right to rule is the master, the one with the obligation to obey is the slave. Rose Wilder Lane, diverse human beings with an infinite variety of purposes and desires and fluctuating wills. This is the beauty, right, in individuality. But the state, the people, society, these are fictions, and they control us. P.J. O'Rourke, a author, talks about this idea of ever-expanding rights. The right to this, the right to that. It's not freedom, it's dependency. Henry Clark Wright talks about when men steal, rob, and murder, it's crime. But when states do it, it gives respectability to crime. And people are allowed to do it. He says, none will pretend that men possess the governing power over men as inherent, underived, and alienable, but yet people still go along with this idea of the right to rule. He says, if slavery be the creature of law, it is necessary that the law be abolished to ensure its destruction. And there's plenty more by him. He says, the authority of human government has none but the point of the sword. He says, we need the immediate abolition of dominion of man over man, of all government. This is an abolitionist speaking. He says sin always creates a necessity for sin. Then the necessity created by the first sin is offered as an apology for the second. It's a never-ending loop that these governments got us playing, a game of control to forever control us. And it's no surprise certain families have kept this control over generations. Ellen Craft on William Craft, a former slave, talking about this deception taking place with his own slavery. And even a former slave, Booker T. Washington, talking about how there's a great dependence upon the government, especially after the Civil War. And this pretense lines up with what Lysander Spooner talked about, how the Civil War was a pretense to make the government look like it was moral, when they were, in fact, the very cause of the slavery. And he says it's a devil's government, right? And more on some of these former slaves. Gustave D. Molinari, before his death in 1912, would state how the American Civil War had not simply been a humanitarian crusade to free the slaves. Even Oscar Wilde tells us this as well within his writings. William Graham Sumner also talks about this idea and the idea of escaping to Canada as being rather difficult, and all the difficulties that happen that many history books tend to leave out. Francis Dashwood Tandy helps to clarify further. No doubt the abolition of slavery was very hard on a number of slave owners, but that was as nothing when compared with the misery the slaves have endured. So with the modern form of slavery, it must be abolished, even if it prove inconsistent to those who are accustomed to live off the toil of others. Every change involves hardship on some class. We are fortunate indeed if that hardship falls solely upon those who have reaped the benefit of the previous injustice. But as it has it, in history, every great change, every great revolution, every great awakening for humanity requires quite a bit of courage, and there's going to be quite a bit of attack, as we have seen with the abolitionist. It will happen again here. People will claim you're crazy for saying that government is slavery, but how much is it really the reality? People must find out for themselves. Stay true to your word, stay true to the concepts, and ask yourself, can we abolish the slavery created by government? And the next question is, what is really the worst form of slavery? Is it this? Thank you for watching this part of the docu-series Slavery Gone for Good. Be sure to watch our other parts for a more deep understanding as to the nature of truth and action in its fullest extent. If you want to learn more and hear more quotes that have not been discussed in this video, be sure to buy the book Slavery Gone for Good Black Book Edition. This is the most important work in history, and you are part of that work. Do not forget it. As Frederick Douglass, former slave and abolitionist, said, "Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave."